So, hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's exciting to see so many of you here who already know how complex and critical the transportation ecosystem has become. And I did forget to share my screen. Hang on one second. Share and share. Okay. So this webinar topic actually grew out of a conversation at the ITS America Policy Summit in March. There was a comment made that state DOTs already have so much data, so much information, but don't necessarily have their arms around what they have and may not be using it to its maximum benefit. So first, though, a little bit about me and STV. I've spent the last 10 years of my career working in both the public and private sectors at the intersection of strategy, technology, and policy and transportation. And at STV, our focus is on making communities better with innovative infrastructure solutions that connect people, places, and the present to the future. Our mobility technologies team works with partners across the public and private sectors to turn complex challenges into actionable solutions. And when we talk about transportation today, it's not just about roads and bridges. It's about connected systems, the traffic signals that communicate, the sensors that monitor conditions in real time, predictive models that help us see and mitigate problems before they happen. And you can see that in the STV mobility technology graphic, everything is grounded in and centered around data. And I know all of you can probably say the same thing about your job. The challenge isn't necessarily the availability of data because it's everywhere, especially at departments of transportation. However, how we inventory, access, and translate that abundance into timely, actionable decisions that improve safety and efficiency for the traveling public is the real puzzle. In other words, how do we fit all of those pieces together to achieve our stated outcomes? So this panel brings together leaders who are navigating that challenge every day. They'll share real examples of what it looks like to cut through the noise, align across disciplines, and embed data into daily decision-making. And just as importantly, they'll speak to the organizational and cultural shifts that are necessary to make those technical solutions stick. And so as you listen, I challenge you to think about your own role. Where are the opportunities to turn your organization's data into decisions that matter, or to support another organization in achieving that goal? And how can we collectively move from siloed efforts to shared solutions that raise the bar across the transportation sector? And while listening to these presentations, please submit any questions through the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screens, as Victoria just mentioned, and we'll get to as many of your questions as we can. And so with that, let's dive in and hear from our esteemed panel of experts. Up first, we will hear from Dara Wheeler.
All right, Lori, thank you. Let me get set up here. Share. Okay, go to full screen. All right, am I good to go?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so thanks again, Lori. It's good to be on this panel. Thank you for including me. My name is Dara Wheeler, and I am the acting Chief Data and Artificial Intelligence Officer at Caltrans. My new role involves elevating our data governance practices, establishing a strong AI foundation. So think about the development of the policy, the training of the workforce, the governance, the use cases, and then driving policy and strategic planning efforts to integrate data and AI initiatives. So that's my new role. I'm not an engineer and I'm not a technologist. I want to make that clear. I have a background in policy, and I like to say that I live on the business side of the house at Caltrans. So just a quick story about how I came into this space. For the last 7 years at Caltrans, I managed the Research, Innovation, and the System Information Program, which is basically the data program at Caltrans. But my journey into artificial intelligence space started only 2 years ago. So my team came to me and said, we need to do something about artificial intelligence because no one else is leading that initiative here at Caltrans. And I remember so vividly my initial reaction and my initial advice was nope, stay clear. It felt risky, and it definitely wasn't in my swim lane. But curiosity got the better of me. And what started off as a little side hustle, I like to say, building that artificial intelligence community of practice at Caltrans just for fun, just to bring together all of those practitioners so that we can share concern and just talk about artificial intelligence, has evolved into the role that I am in today and one of the most exciting and rewarding jobs in my workforce journey. All right, so today I'd like to share how Caltrans approaches data and then reflect on whether we are truly leveraging it for insights or if we remain data rich but insight poor. I think you'll see a lot of that theme. I'm trying to tie the panel's theme into a lot of my slides in my discussion today. All right, so at Caltrans, with the creation of this new role I'm sitting in today, we were both intentional and strategic in elevating the importance of data internally and then pairing it with artificial intelligence. We all know that data is foundational to good AI outputs, and without good, clean, authoritative data, the AI results are often meaningless or potentially untrusted or not valuable. So at Caltrans, we've been working on an enterprise data governance strategy and implementation plan since 2018. And being such a large organization of 22,000 employees, we knew it was going to take some time for full implementation. We know we are data rich, and I would even go as far as to say we're not only a mobility company, but we're a data company. And the trick is to learn to manage the data so that it's a valuable commodity for all. And that for us is still a work in progress. So in addition to creating a new role which elevates the importance of data, we also implemented some internal strategies for tackling that data overload. And I'm going to give you some examples. First, we are recognizing data as a strategic asset. To be data rich, you really need to elevate the data to the same level of importance as funding, infrastructure, and workforce. Okay, so data should always be elevated and important. We also found value in creating clear governance framework for managing data. We define the roles and the responsibilities and the policies and the standards for data quality and access and security. That's a huge value and super important. We recognize the value in focusing on high value use cases. And by this, I'm saying we don't necessarily govern everything at once. We prioritize the data sets that directly improve the most important efforts like our safety operations and customer outcomes. We empower our data stewards. We can't do this all alone. We have brought on data stewards to help, and we embed the governance into the work of programs so that the accountability is shared and not siloed. We integrate governance into decision making by aligning our governance policies with our procurement workflows and our new technology adoption. We feel that it's important to build strong data literacy and a strong data culture. And we do that by training our staff and communicating the why and create the culture that values the trusted data. And then lastly, we measure and communicate the impact by showing how governance improves decision quality, efficiency, and mission outcomes. All right, my next slide. So this is a slide about managing the data. There's three buckets I want to talk about. The first being data bloat. So these are challenges. Again, data bloat. So we're collecting more data than we ever have before, but not all of the data is meaningful or actionable. So without clear governance, data becomes overwhelming, the storage costs escalate, and staff are just left searching for what really matters instead of focusing on the insights. Next, data quality. So data is only as valuable as it is trusted. Let me say that again. Data is only as valuable as it is trusted. And so inconsistent standards, incomplete records, and siloed systems really compromise quality and erode confidence in decision making. For a DOT, that means the difference between potentially preventing a crash and reacting to one after it occurs. Super important. Data fluidity. So data needs to be seamlessly across programs, which is what Lori was talking about earlier. It needs to move seamlessly across programs, agencies, and even levels of government Too often our systems are rigid, they lack that interoperability, or those legacy processes keep data locked in the silos. And I talk about technology debt a lot when I talk about the value of AI. And just know that when data can't flow, opportunities for innovation, for collaboration, and for timely decision making are lost. So the underlying theme here is that these challenges aren't just technical, they're also organizational and cultural. And addressing them requires elevating data and data governance to a strategic priority so that data is managed as a true asset. Next slide. Oh, get to do all of this. Oh, no, going back. Oh, well, I am not going to be able to get back, so I'm just going to continue going. So this is the slide that we're looking on right now, but I want to talk briefly about building trust. So for building trust in data, it starts with governance and transparency. People need to know where the data come from, how it's being managed, and that it's consistent across the organization. At Caltrans, we've made trust a priority by setting clear standards for data quality, assigning ownership, and embedding accountability into our process. So the building trust slide that I just quickly flashed through, let's see, had another component to it. And I would say that from a transportation perspective, the data that DOTs most rely on is safety related. So think about those crash records, the roadway conditions, the traffic patterns, and increasingly connected vehicle data. These data sets are the backbone of how we make decisions to save lives and reduce congestion and strengthen resilience. Ultimately, trust is built not just in the numbers themselves, but how often we use them consistently, ethically, and service the mission, our mission of serving and protecting the traveling public. All right, the human in the loop slide, so I'm caught up here. Human in the loop or human on top. So this is an expression you might hear, human in loop or human on top. We know that for artificial intelligence, that relates to decision making. But for data management, it might mean something different. So here's a few strategies that I like to emphasize when I talk about human in the loop for data management. Context and judgment matter. Data can show patterns, but humans provide the contextual knowledge to interpret the anomalies. Data stewardship requires accountability. Humans must define what data means, set the standards, and ensure the quality. Machines can process, but people determine trustworthiness. Bias detection and correction. Automated systems can perpetuate bias if left unchecked. Human oversight ensures data is representative, it is fair, and it's aligned with the public values. And then translating data into insight. So algorithms surface trends, but humans link those trends to the policy, to the planning, and to the investment decisions. And then the last strategy I would say is building trust. So citizens and stakeholders are more likely to trust the DOT decisions when they know human judgment is applied alongside analytics. So a little bit about human in the loop. And then my last slide. So insight is a governance issue, not just a technology issue. And I think I'll end just referring back to our panel title, Data Rich, Insight Poor. Being data rich but insight poor isn't a technology issue, it's a governance issue. Technology can process information, but without clear ownership standards and accountability, data remains fragmented and underused. The insight only emerges when governance turns raw data into trusted, shared asset that leaders can act on with confidence. Thank you for the opportunity to share my views, and I will stop sharing and turn it over.
Thanks so much, Dara. Really appreciate that. So next we're going to go to Ohio and hear from Preeti.
Thank you, Lori and Dara. I feel like I learned a lot. Let me get my screen right and share. There we go. So hello, everyone. I'm Preeti Chowdhury. I'm Executive Director of Drive Ohio, which is the smart mobility and innovation arm of the Ohio Department of Transportation. So our mission is to advance emerging transportation technologies that solve real-world challenges, whether it's safety and congestion or access and economic opportunity. Practically speaking, our day-to-day work is a lot of research and deployment, and that is all to inform policy and long-term operations for the agency. We're doing work that helps the state make decisions and investments that prepare Ohio for the future of mobility. And I think it goes without saying that data insights are a huge part of that. So, in managing all of these transportation technology research projects, demonstration projects, we generate enormous amounts of data internally and across private partners. The list of data grows and grows, but too often that data lives in silos. It takes special skills to analyze. It doesn't flow quickly enough to impact day-to-day operations. We get reports, maybe even we get dashboards, but we don't always get action. That's a big part of my team's focus and what we're trying to work on moving forward. So for my slides today, I'm going to talk through some examples of projects that really seek to build pipelines that turn raw data into decision-grade intelligence. And I'll start with a project that's uh, forging a public-private partnership, specifically with Honda. So together, Honda and Ohio DOT are automatically sharing roadway condition data from production level vehicles with our maintenance personnel. So we have Honda vehicles out there. They're specifically dedicated to our research at this time, but the idea of this pilot program or research project is that in the future, this information could be crowdsourced. So the vehicles detect poor pavement, deficient signage, deficient striping, and in real time shares that information with our maintenance crews. We're flagging that information so that our crews can respond to it more quickly, can remedy those issues without waiting for customer complaints or manual inspections. Right now in Ohio, we manually drive all of our roads every 2 weeks, which is obviously very time consuming. And so this project seeks to really make this process a lot more efficient and see our roadways a lot safer. I mean, we can fix potholes much more quickly. We can, again, address deficient signage much more quickly. It's a proof of concept that I think will have a lot of meaning down the road, and is an example of how public-private data sharing can give us an earlier picture of where problems are forming and help us to be proactive, which is an undercurrent of all of the work that we do. So our next project is called the event streaming platform, and this is really focused on moving from displaying information to automatically triggering action. So we're piloting a couple of specific use cases, the first being crash prediction with proactive mitigation, such as adjusting signal timing, speed limits where we have variable speed limit signs, or notifying our traffic management center and first responders, even pre-positioning law enforcement when uh, there's a high risk of a crash. So this kind of closes the gap between when data arrives and when an action happens. We're also using this mechanism to test a program that will, again, pull data from the private sector, get automatic notifications of when a an airbag is deployed, and then notify the corresponding first responder. So especially in areas that have limited connectivity, or just low utilization roads. I mean, rural roads where you may not see people very frequently. When we have a crash there, it can take a long time for notification of that crash. And so the second use case I mentioned is really to help speed up the reaction for when an incident does happen. I wanted to mention the importance of dashboards. Obviously, dashboards are not new or sort of revolutionary, but maybe they are. Um, Dashboards are a way of embedding intelligence into daily operations. And at ODOT, we use them for maybe some of the typical things like monitoring our crashes, weather, work zones. But we've also got some new applications like visualizing drone operations across the state, viewing those crash risk predictions that I mentioned in the last kind of application. And these sorts of things give us a shared real-time view that our operators, our engineers, our district staff can all act on simultaneously. So they're pretty meaningful kind of in the day-to-day for us. Uh, we deal with all of the emerging transportation technology, and automation is a part of that puzzle. Now, here in Ohio, we don't have a ton of industry automated vehicles. We don't have Waymo yet. But so, but we do have some state-sponsored AV deployments. And for those deployment projects, we've collected a ton of data. And I think this exercise just helps us understand what we might need in the future and what other states are already dealing with in terms of collecting and making best use of that AV data. So I bring up an example that we led, which is a rural automated driving systems project where we had automated vehicles in rural Southeast Ohio. And we collected over 50 terabytes of data. And really, the purpose of this project was to understand how these systems operate in rural contexts specifically, where they're not always tested or applied. So, with this, we want to inform the development of the technology, ensure that it can be applied in these contexts. And so we're hosting and sharing this data, which of course is at a cost, but we're hoping to do some really important work with it. And starting with working with our university partners, with Youngstown State University and others to analyze the data, analyze the disengagement data, understand the issues that we face quite literally in rural areas with automation. And then we're also thinking about how we prepare infrastructure and policy moving forward. And a piece of that is how we, in the future, might host and house and what we would do with the data. So I think it's just, it's not something we have the answer to yet, but it's just a project that I wanted to note. Last but not least, I wanted to just mention that none of this work is happening in a vacuum or can happen in a vacuum. We are part of the MASTO Connected and Automated Vehicle Committee and the Smart Belt Coalition, and we're always working on data interoperability, shared approaches to connected and automated vehicles, to work zone data, because congestion, freight traffic, heavy crashes, they don't stop at state lines. And so our solutions can't either. We're doing all of this work kind of in the nitty-gritty, trying to understand what data each other has, how we're all using it to make sure that we're all really well aligned moving forward. With that, I will close and I look forward to answering questions. Lori, pass it back to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Preeti. And finally, our last speaker today is Elise. And you are
Unmute.
still muted.
Yes, I am unmuted now. Hopefully you can hear me. All right. I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. All right. All right, so I am Elise Felposh. I work for WSP in the Midwest region, but prior to that, I was with the Michigan Department of Transportation as the statewide Connect Automated Vehicle Specialist, and I worked with a number of the different regional coalitions that Preeti just shared. I am so pleased to be able to be here today and talk to you a little bit about not only WSP's perspective associated with data and the value that we, internally look at data, but also from the way that which we support our variety of folks throughout the world, but also being able to bring forward kind of my perspective as someone that's been on both the public and the private side. So first of all, I'm very pleased to be able to speak a little bit about WSP's vision with internal data. So obviously, as a very large global company, we really try to be future ready. We're looking at the ways in which we can utilize the data that we have as an internal to our organization in the best ways possible. So our ultimate story when it comes to data and the vision that we have is to improve delivery efficiency, reduce costs, leverage technology solutions by ultimately adding value to our project communities and clients. And this really enhances what I just heard Dara and Preeti share, which is that data is only valuable if it is trusted. We need to have quality data that is absolutely critical to ultimately be insightful. And the other piece is that it is always important to look at data interoperability, and that is critical as issues don't stop at state lines. And I will argue that they don't stop at national borders or continental borders either, and that there are things that kind of transcend the global community when it comes to transportation and the way that we move people and goods. So that is really the message that we are trying to share, that I'm trying to share with you today. Oops, hold on. So at the very first slide talked very slightly about, if you were very quick to read, I'm trying to go through these slides a little bit quicker. So we'll be able to share those with you later if you'd like to see them a little bit more. But one of the pieces that we did touch on is this idea of being future ready. And what does this mean? And how does that really drive forward, the vision associated with data at WSP? And this quote here is from two of our, executive leaders that we have within our organization, that just trying to showcase that data technologies are transforming industries worldwide. And as we strive to become the leader in our industry, we must prepare for the evolving reality of data, thus really highlighting the very important insightful data needs that we have there. While we embrace the future ready approach, entails building strong foundations that will unlock value for our clients and our workforce. So again, just really showcasing that value here within our organization. And this is really critical. And I'm looking at these slides, this was something that, as I kind of came over to this organization, the scale with which the organization globally has grown, you can see here that we have almost, over 70,000 folks. So the quality of data and being able to highlight those priorities in which we share data, even internally to our own organization, is something that is inherently critical to our success and being able to be intentionally insightful and ensuring that we have that value and are really squeezing that value out of that data that we have. So that's why back in November of 2023, we established our own internal data strategic plan. And this is something that's really looking at unlocking that value of that data across the globe and being able to ensure that we are sharing that kind of collective genius that does exist out there in the realms of data. We also have our own data center of excellence. So having folks that are going to be looking at the ways in which we utilize that data, but also being able to ensure that we are breaking down those silos that exist across the board in the different ways that we have interoperability, even internal to our own organization. You would think that interoperability is something just to be looked at various organizations, various states, different local agencies, but it's something even internally that we struggle and we're working on dealing with through the establishment of these differing pieces. And ultimately, with all of this, the varied importance associated with the strategy and governance over data integrity. So I wanted to take a moment and highlight a handful of projects just to try to showcase the various ways in which we have seen our partners be able to utilize data. So one of the really critical projects that I wanted to share here is this idea of AshtaWare's Open API. So this is a way that it is a scalable interoperable platform initiative that was led by WSP with all of the state DOTs that enhances data exchange and integration within the AshtaWare suite of transportation management products. It is built on the Open API spec and supports improved data management, analysis, and decision-making by enabling connectivity between AshtaWare applications such as bridge design, construction management, safety, and external systems. So you can see, looking at a solution like this, it's really looking at the ways in a very, very broad sense. How can we democratize DOT data across all 50 states? How can we lead towards easier integration and ultimately to lower cost, faster deployments, and being able to ensure that everyone is able to access the data and be able to get all that they possibly can out of it. So this is a really important project, not only for us, but also for those state DOTs to ultimately allow the best utilization of that data on the very broad spectrum. But then also there are data projects like this project that was done in Kentucky for the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, is to look at the ways in which we can utilize weather data to be able to establish where high friction surface treatment applications can be done. So you can see how utilizing these 75 sites established throughout these kind of weather centers, this will allow us to be able to ensure that we have the right pavement treatment and make recommendations for those. So again, we've got one project that's looking at things at a very, very high level, but also you can see these very immediate applications of very intentional data and being able to ensure that we evaluate this as best practice and make recommendations for other friction related treatments and evaluating those current installations for safety performances. There's another few other projects here that I do want to share as well. So one of these probably more near and dear to my heart as a Michigander is this tree project that's been done, the Smart Intersection project. There is a lot of really wonderful data usage cases that are seen here, but it is this idea of being able to integrate between multiple field sensors to improve safety systems, looking at red light violation warning, transit signal priority, all of the fun V2X components, and really showcasing how interoperability is kind of the main crux of all that is being done here, and looking at the ways in which if we highlight and focus on only one bit of data, that it really isn't a rich, insightful thing. So we need to really consider all of the different pieces and find the ways in which we can utilize this kind of common core method of data collection to be able to customize this tool set for highly accurate mapping and ultimately be able to make these intersections much, much safer, not only for vehicles, but also for pedestrian safety. And the other piece that's really interesting about this project in particular that I know that we are starting to see more and more throughout the nation is this idea of how can we detect and prioritize near miss events. So that's something that I see us looking much more broadly at, is not only how do we prevent the crashes that happened in retrospect, but how can we utilize the data that we have today to ultimately be able to make a safer environment for things that almost happened, which I know is such a hard thing for us to really focus and prioritize on, is this idea of, well, how can we prevent those pieces that almost happened? Well, with data and really insightful, intentional, use case driven data collection and analysis methodologies, it will allow us to ultimately be able to prevent the unpreventable. All right, so very similar in data insight, but also very specifically valuable. Within Virginia DOT, there's the 2-lane rural road machine learning with dash cams for automated inventory. This is this idea of being able to, as you're driving, be able to utilize dash cameras to automatically understand what's happening with your assets, whether that's sign position, missing pavement markings, ensuring that we have accurate reflectivity. This is something that even as I look back on my history way back when I first started many years ago, one of my original jobs as a new engineer with the Michigan DOT was to drive around with the printed off PDF that showcased, all right, go drive down and see if the signs are accurately marked and stored in the inventory. And you would go and drive the roadways and check the signs and mark down when they were in an inaccurate position or if they'd fallen over. And it was a very manual, very important task, but that was really the only method that we had of being able to collect that. So this project is amazing because what it allows us to do is be able to take that previously very manual process where you have the one-year engineer out there making and marking the tools. This allows for that automation of that process as you're just simply doing other tasks to better showcase it and collect not only a wide, very depth breadth of data, but also be able to do that immediate analysis. So it can look at the current asset lists that you have and compare it to what's happening in the real world. And then lastly, we have the connected intersections message monitoring system. So this looks at and monitors V2X data for operational and standards compliance. So it's looking at that really high quality, valuable data. So that was something that Dara, my co-panelist, mentioned very early on, that data is only valuable if it is trusted. And what this is really looking at is looking and ensuring that that data is valuable and trusted and identifying when that data changes unexpectedly. So really really valuable. Same thing similarly here at the bottom, you see with SPAT and MAP, so signal phase and timing, as well as those more accurate mapping scenarios. So containing all of those elements and ensuring and reevaluating that they are continuously valuable is really interesting. And as you look at that and find out, is this consistent with driver behavior? There's some really exciting projects that's happening here. So finally, getting a bit long in the tooth, but I'll leave these last two slides that I have here. I actually put a little QR code up in the top if you'd like to actually read more. We do also have, because we are a kind of a big organization, we do utilize a lot of our global insights to be able to help write documentation, look into the ways in which we might be able to do a wide variety of things. But the two that I'm sharing here with you today are the most recent reports that have been developed, and not for any specific client, but just more so for the broader industry as a whole. So there's a document entitled Digitization of Road Transport Infrastructure. And the next one is How to Bring ITS to the Next Level. And they both are very focused around data sharing and how it's powering better decisions and transforming kind of the digital landscape associated with transportation. So I have, like I said, QR codes to both of those reports. One was written by Ian Peaty out of the UK, the other by Virginia Langham out of the US. And with that, I thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you, Elise. That was fantastic. I think we had 3 amazing presentations, and one of the through lines of all of them is that you have to be able to trust the data in order to use it effectively. And I think that is really the center of what we are talking about here today. So we got there's a bunch of back and forth going on in the Q&A, and there was just some questions I wanted to pull out of there. And then of course I have some of my own as we move towards the Q&A portion of what we're talking about here today. So the first question out of the Q&A, Dara, I think you answered this in there, but I did want to bring it out as well, asking about, will there be statewide data standards and will it be accessible? I think that's, a really interesting piece of, as you all are working on this, are you looking for, and we talk about interoperability all the time, right? And it applies to this as well, right? Can we actually all access it? Should it be contained within a state? Should it be contained within a region? Should it be national? And we won't hold any of you to this, but as you are thinking about this and going through your work, have any of you thought about this, and is there a goal in mind? We'll put it that way. If anybody wants to speak up, go ahead. Yes.
Well, I came off mute first, so I guess I get to go first. So there should be. I don't know what the national conversation is looking like in the state of California. I can't say with confidence whether or not we do have some plans in the process for statewide standards. There should be. We do have a data office in the state of California government that is leading data efforts. There is an open data portal in the state, and I like to say that data, being a public agency, is the people's data, right? We should be able to put more of our data standards, more of our data sets out there, and allow those for companies and consumers to be able to use and to see. So not a complete answer, but yes, I believe in that wholeheartedly and think that there should be some standards and more opportunities to make data public and shareable.
Fantastic. You're off mute next.
I'll second that and say we agree in Ohio, and we're attempting to create a platform for data sharing across jurisdictions, across public and private entities. That is part of what the event streaming platform is envisioned to do. We're early on in the process, I would say, of having that come to full fruition, but that's certainly the goal.
Great.
Yeah, and I will just add, I guess, third, the idea of national data sharing. I think that it is something that is absolutely critical, that it happens at the highest level that we can possibly muster. I think that it is also something that you will see happen in one way or shape or form. So I will kind of hearken back historically to the effort that happened with the work zone data exchange. So that's something that happened a couple of years ago where we identified that, man, it'd be great if we all shared work zone data in the same fashion using the same language. And, it really started out initially because it wasn't being taken on at that federal level. It kind of started as this, I like to call it grassroots effort, but I think it was a little bit higher than that. But for the sake of conversation, we'll say that it was grassroots effort, where you had a number of individuals that said, we all concur. All of us from the state to the industry to the technologists, we agree that this should be happening. So folks started to develop and establish their own data standards, and now it's being taken on at SAE level as a national data standard. And I think that you're starting to see that associated with general data sharing as well, and a lot of other respects. So you have things like the AV Pool Fund study that are looking into different ways that data can be shared. You're looking at, MASTO, and the data sharing initiatives that they're hearkening. But you also have other, pooled fund study initiatives that are looking at pulling together kind of mass vision for data language, data standards. But this whole idea of being interoperable and valuable and really trying to learn from one another in the way that we can share data is starting to come through at those upper levels, whether they have that national vision down and they have the time to be able to do it, or we realize that we need to do it ourselves. I think it's happening regardless.
Absolutely. So moving on to kind of, when we think about the big picture level, right? Every agency and organization's mission ties back to outcomes for the public of the organizations that we're talking about. And so when you think about your organization's mission, where do you see the biggest opportunity for data to directly improve outcomes for the public, whether it's safety, resilience, efficiency, something else? And I'm going to start with Dara, because just the creation of your position, which is relatively new, I think plants a flag that this is something that Caltrans and California is looking at, not just looking at as part of the program, but looking at a very high level, as far as where you are as well within the organization.
Yeah, great question, Lori. And I still remember when you and I connected, gosh, probably about 4 or 5 months ago, and I told you that I moved into this new role. You go, that's a fancy new title. What do you do? So I think I explained a little bit what I do, but going back to the question, I think one of the biggest opportunities, in my opinion, an organization should be doing, if you're not, and I think that we have a lot of data experts and data believers on today's call, so you're probably already doing this at your companies, but dedicate a position to focus on data or data and artificial intelligence, and elevate it in your organization so it gets the strategic recognition that it deserves. I'll also say that if there's ever operational cuts, and I forgot to say this in my slides, if there's ever operational cuts to an organization, data should not be one of those things that's considered on the chopping block, because we can never not invest enough in data. But to the other part of the question, Lori, you said about from a strategic perspective, I think another big opportunity, because safety is the heart of our mission, data gives us one of the most powerful tools to really protect the traveling public. The biggest opportunities in data lie in being using that data to be more proactive and more predictive. Like using that crash and roadway data, combining it with the traffic volumes, weather, or even that emerging connected vehicle data can really help us predict and identify those high-risk locations before those tragedies occur. I also wanted to say that data also allows us to bring equity into safety by ensuring that our investments aren't just made where crashes are the most visible, but also where those vulnerable communities may be disproportionately affected. But ultimately, the opportunity to turn the vast amount of information that we collect into actionable insights is reliant upon reacting after the incidents happen to preventing them in the first place. And that's how data directly saves lives, which is more important and the most important things that we can do in our agencies and at state DOTs.
Absolutely. Elise, Preeti, anybody want to jump in?
I couldn't have said it better.
The only other piece that I want to add, and this is a bit that we've talked, I think it's been a part of all of the presentations that have been given today, but I would just want to also stress like the criticality of looking at the responsibility as we look at data, insightful data, and this rich volume of data is looking at the security of that data and ensuring that we are looking through this lens of how can we ensure that the data is quality and is trusted, but also is very safe and being able to be utilized from a more holistic nature by all of the different parties that need to, but also by nobody else that doesn't need to. So it's a very interesting pathway as we look at trying to be like data rich and continuously insightful with this data, is that responsibility to ensure that the data is secure as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving on to kind of the data governance of it all, right? So when we think about this, technology alone is not enough. The rules and the structure around data matter just as much. And we heard a lot about this during all of your presentations. But what policies or governance structures have you seen that have been the most effective in ensuring that data is treated as a trusted asset, gets back to the security and the accuracy of it? And what are the biggest gaps that you see that still need to be addressed? So what do we still need to work on? And so, Preeti, I know you talked about this during your presentation, but is there anything else that you want to highlight, or just for the benefit of reiterating it for the group?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. I think I want to ground it in like something we can all see and experience, and a challenge we all face in transportation. The most dynamic situations are the most challenging, whether for humans or for automated driving systems or AVs, whatever. So work zones are a big topic we think about a lot. They're a big concern. They're a huge risk. We literally put our people out in harm's way. If you've ever been out in a work zone, we are so close to extremely fast-moving traffic. It's terrifying. And so obviously we want to make sure our work zones are safe. Our work zones are, they're also, the motoring public is safe in moving around them, and they know what to expect. And so when we think about a lot of the work we've done operationally to improve work zone safety, it's mostly focused on communicating information, like Elise mentioned, the work zone data exchange, communicating information to the public, to drivers. And a big area of concern around that communication is you want the information to be correct. And that is true of any information you're sharing with the public, but especially safety critical, life-saving information, right? So that validation, like we've all been talking about, is so important. And what we have found is we don't yet have a solution to how we make sure um, you know all the work zone information can be automatically, I'd say. I mean, there are ways to validate and crowdsource, validation of work zones, but that sort of happens when they're already out there. And what we've been thinking a lot about is how do we use technology to help us validate what's going on in the field in real time to get it, much, much closer to when it's actually being implemented and be able to communicate it accurately. And that's where we combine the use of technology, sensors, or other sources of connected vehicle data to help with that validation process to give us confidence in the data. And that's one really specific anecdote. But in general, something that we've been thinking about with all emerging tech is just building confidence and having that accuracy when we communicate to the public. So not something we solve for, but something we are trying to solve for.
Definitely. I think, you bring it back to, we have to be able to trust the data, right? Anybody else want to jump in on that question? Elise.
I just want to add a little bit more to what Preeti just said, but I do think that there is, and this is Elise's personal opinion, this is not cover up that piece. I think that there's a lot of value in data when we are transparent about the level of detail and accuracy that we have. So I think that while, states may never be able to relay 100% accurate work zone information, I think that having a scalable validation criteria associated with that data, and a certainty level has a lot of value as we look at the ways in which we can utilize that data as an industry. There is value in the data when we understand what we're looking at. If we guarantee it is 100% accurate, and then people find out that, oh, that's not 100% accurate, now they don't trust any information that we relay. But if we can be insightful and intentional about being transparent with what that data actually shows us and what it's actually telling, I think that there's value in all different qualities of those data. We just need to think a little bit outside the box and stop looking at it as, well, if I can't have it be 100%, then I don't want it. Because I do think there's value there.
Definitely. Okay. So moving on, kind of taking what you just said, I think that transitions really nicely into my next question, right? We think about, for so long, it's been risk elimination, risk mitigation, and now we are kind of transitioning into a time of risk optimization, right? What is good enough, and how do we define what that is? But ultimately, even the best systems still come down to people, right? And what their mindsets are. So thinking about the culture and the skills that determine whether insights actually drive action. So many agencies say that their biggest challenges in technology, that it is people, building the right culture, including the right skill sets around data use. So how are you all helping your teams embrace data-driven decision making? And I'm gonna start with Elise, because you've now had the benefit of hindsight from your time at Michigan DOT. And so are you using any of those lessons learned or best practices from your time there with your current clients in order to help them drive this type of action?
Yes. So I think if, looking back and putting my time with Michigan's hat on, we established this new enterprise information management office prior to my departure, and that had a chance to really ruminate for a number of years. And the whole intention of that was being able to bridge that gap from IT to the DOT and be able to speak that language of priority of data. And we established, cybersecurity officers and all those different things. And there's a lot of value add from that lesson, a lot of challenges, right, associated with the establishment of a brand new area of focus, similar to, I'm sure, that lends itself towards all organizations, right? Just learning from that experience of establishing this new office and regime and way of thinking, but also even from looking at it from an organization like WSP, we are moving forward with this new intelligent mobility initiative where we look at the ways in which we can consider all these different attributes associated with ITS. So it's not just about transportation. We have transportation, advisory, digital services, all these different branches. And I see something very similar where we have these kind of ways in which we are kind of bridging the gaps associated with kind of this thought umbrella of intelligent transportation, intelligent mobility. How do we utilize data in a way that can be trusted, is user needs driven, and we're being very intentional about the insights that we're finding from data and the impacts associated. So I think that if I had kind of one message to be able to bring forward from the past into the future and out to clients, it's this idea that you need to broaden your mind and the way that you're thinking associated with data and technology and future mobility and innovation, because all of these components are now coming into play, and things that didn't used to be in your mind part of the equation are now 100% necessary for success.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'll add to that. In state government, sometimes government in general, sometimes you have to really fight for things like new positions to focus on data, and for folks to value the importance of all of these types of projects that we've talked about, or interoperability efforts, which might be sort of hard to tangibly see. So something that I've been maybe berating my team about, maybe that's a strong word, but I've been, really, really forceful with my team about. And my team, by the way, is full of really passionate folks that want to see, safer roadways and want to see us try new things in order to get to a better place. But we are not always good at telling the story of outcomes and showing results. Like when we do something that is driven by, data insights, or some other kind of innovative or new way of doing something, we're not the best communicators as engineers. I say that as an engineer myself. And so I think just really collecting tangible outcomes. And I'll bring up the project that I mentioned with Honda as an example. When the project started, we have excellent people working on it. A lot of the metrics that they were looking to capture were all related to uh, accuracy, latency of the data, very technical metrics, I would say, that weren't necessarily telling the story of how doing this would mean the folks in our districts, our maintenance workers, would have to spend less time standing on a two-lane roadway taking a picture of a pothole. And like we need to connect those two things. So that's the only thing I would add.
And I guess I will add that if we're going to say that the biggest challenge isn't technology, it's the people and the culture. We've already talked about building trust in the data. I would say that we really need to invest in the people, not just the technology. And, we're talking about with new artificial intelligence coming along, driving decisions faster. We need to really make sure that we are upskilling our staff and offering role-specific training for them. At Caltrans, we've identified data champions, and we have a community of practice, a peer group that are really stewards of good information. But we also just need to really focus on normalizing learning and getting learning out to our staffs to make them understand the criticality of having good data sets.
Great. So just looking at the time, I have one last question. This is going to be 30-second quick fire, question for all of you. As the three of you know, I had a very long list of questions, so this could have been a 2 or 3 hour webinar if we wanted it to be. So much to dig into. But as we have talked about all of these opportunities and challenges, let's end with something maybe a little bit more imaginative, but I think probably a little more tangible as well. So if you could wave your wand and fix one barrier that holds back the smarter use of transportation data in government, what would it be? Anybody want to jump in? Elise?
Oh,
Oh,
you go, Elise.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, I'll get the easy one out of the way. I wish that we would all speak the same language collectively, not like globally, like as people, but like data language. If all data could be communicated in the same format so we could all understand what everybody else has, that would be the best.
the magic of interoperability.
Magic of interoperability. Yes.
Yeah. Preeti?
I should have gone first.
Was that yours too?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. We spend too much effort focused on integration and, how to develop new tools that can reach into these different pots of information, versus focusing on the action. So that would be my thing.
I used to manage political campaigns, and we said you always had to repeat something 7 times before someone would start to listen to you. So I do not mind repetition of important messages.
Excellent.
And I'll just say, if I could wave a wand, I would say that we definitely need to treat our data as an asset and invest in it more. And all too often, data is one of those things that's not invested in and valued as a strategic asset. And I really think that would be something that I would like to change.
Fantastic point. Well, thank you all so much. I've learned a ton just in this past hour, as I always do from all of you. Thank you for participating. And thank you to the audience also for being here with us for this hour. Please feel free to reach out to me or any of our panelists if you want to continue the conversation or have any questions.